I think this is my favorite Le Guin. The Word for World is Forest is a novel by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's part of her Hainish cycle of books. This is definitely a different Le Guin than the other books that I've read. I have previously read The Dispossessed and The Left Hand of Darkness. This book shares a little bit in terms of that world building, but it's very different in terms of tone. This book is told from the perspective of three different characters. Captain Don Davidson, who is a captain in the Terran fleet. Earth has colonized a planet called Athshe, I think. I think that's how you say it, or Athshe. Or Athshe, maybe. And they've colonized this planet for resources and have enslaved the local population. And it definitely has like a strong colonial tint. At the beginning of the book, the very first thing that happens is one of the Athshans, Selver, leads a raid that burns down an entire human camp and an entire camp of Terrans, killing everyone. The book then follows the aftermath of this from the perspective of Selver and the perspective of Dawn, as well as the perspective of a researcher who I can't remember his name. He befriended Selver in the book. I got turned on to this book because I watched another video from a YouTuber called Bookpilled. It's a great channel. I think you should go subscribe to it. But in one of his videos, he called this book a very pissed off Le Guin. And that piqued my interest. I was like, I wonder what that must be like to have a book where Le Guin is just very, pissed off. So I started to read it. I think he's right in that assessment. I think that's a pretty accurate assessment of this book. It's very, very different from her other works that I have read. The Dispossessed and Left Hand of Darkness are narrative explorations of philosophical ideas. They are kind of even-handed, almost a little academic in terms of their narrative style. They're also told as sort of fish-out-of-water tales, so they're told from the perspective of someone who is going to a new society and learning about that society. And it covers philosophical ideas in an almost, not quite neutral, but like in an almost objective way. This book is like if Ursula K. Le Guin took her gloves off and said, I'm not going to hold the hand of my readers anymore. We are going to have a conversation about war, about colonialism, about the price and cost of war, and not the cost of war from an economic defense spending perspective, but what does it cost us as human beings? The characters in this book are the best part. Don Davidson is the least likable character. He is angry and he is, he dehumanized the Athshans, and he is very racist. We are in his head for much of the book, and so reading this book was a very enraging experience at times because I kept just thinking like, man, this guy is like such a piece of shit. I'm probably going to bleep that out. And it was definitely an interesting read in that regard, that we are replaced into the perspective of this guy who is just one of the worst people in the universe. The other perspective is told from Selver's perspective, who is an Athshan, and he is essentially comes to be a leader among the Athshan people as he leads these raids on the Terran settlements. The Athshans exist in two different realities. They exist in the corporeal, real world, but then they also exist in this dream world that is a kind of shared dreamlike space. And it's sort of implied that that's how they organize these raids on the Terran settlements. Selver is one of the most present of the Athshans. He's the Athshan that we see most often. He is a point of view character for a few chapters, not for a huge chunk of the book. I think most of the book is told from the Terran perspective, but for a couple of chapters, he is the point of view character. And we get to see the occupation from the perspective of him. I think part of this is interesting to think about what Le Guin is trying to say about war and about violence in general, and about colonialism and what it does to our culture and our humanity and our identity. The Athshians are a non-violent race. They don't even have a word in their language for world or for war. They in the book there's like a chapter where they say like there is violence, but it's not part of their culture, and it's not part, it's almost always in personal self-defense, and not on the scale of the kind of violence that the Athshians will come to inflict on the Terran occupiers. This is one of the more not depressing, but like difficult parts and challenging parts of the book to read. Is, the book seems to really be making the point that the Terran occupation and this violence that has been inhibited or inflicted upon the Athshians has turned the Athshians from a culture that does not know violence at all to a culture that is becoming violent. There's a section of the book where Selvar is really, trying to create a ceasefire, trying to end this conflict and say, look, we will end this conflict if you leave our place. If you leave our planet. Sorry. And that kind of dialogue between him and the leaders of the Terran occupation is very interesting in how it is portrayed and how it works out in the narrative. I think Don Davidson is the character that is most challenging to read. Being in his head is like, it's challenging and difficult to read because of just how racist and how dehumanizing he is towards the Athshians, and it's really challenging to be in his head and to realize that he's, a point of view character that we are. I think one of the more challenging things for me is reading his chapters and reading his point of view and thinking, this it's making me angry and irate, and it's enraging, and it makes me very uncomfortable reading these chapters. This book is largely considered to be the inspiration for Avatar, and by Avatar I mean the blue alien David Cameron movie, not Avatar: The Last Airbender. And it is definitely clear why that is the case, like why people think that. I definitely think the book is better than the movie in a lot of ways. I think it is more making the point about the sort of cost of war and the cost of violence and the cost of colonialism and what it does to cultural identities. And that's sort of another thing about the idea that the Athshians become violent as a result of their interactions with the Terrans. There's an aspect of them losing their cultural identity in a way because of that as a result of the occupation. The other theme of this book is the impact of environmental changes. So the Terrans are coming to this planet to essentially strip mine it for resources, and the title of the book, "The Word for World is Forest," has to do with the fact that in the Athshian language, world and forest are the same thing. The entire world of Athshi is a forest, and the Athshians view the forest as the whole world. So there is a sense in which when the Terrans come to Athshi and start stripping it up, and then they are destroying the world. I think another aspect of the colonialism is how the Terrans rename the planet to New Tahiti, and that is itself, again, it sort of speaks to the loss of cultural identity in this book, and the loss of sort of how the Athshins are losing, how colonialism, it needs to erase the cultural identity of the colonized. It's sort of a principal facet of colonialism, and I think that's also kind of a strong point and theme and undercurrent to this book. Is not just that the Athshins are losing their cultural identity, and not just that the colonization is destroying their environment and their planet, but that in some ways the colonizers are not don't even really understand the world that they come to inhabit. They can't understand this dreamlike experience that the Athshins experience as a very real place. It's a very real, tangible part of their existence. And yeah, I think that speaks to some of the themes here. All in all, this is definitely my favorite Le Guin. I think it's the most interesting one. I think it's the one that I think is the most challenging and the most impressive in a way. It's her shortest book that I have read so far. I know she's written some short stories, but it's the shortest one that I have read, and it's the one that I think is probably my favorite of her work, in terms of just how well constructed it is, and just how much it made me uncomfortable, and how that really worked in service of the themes of the book. I think that this is probably the must-read Le Guin, in my opinion. I think it's her best work. Again, that I've read. There's still some Le Guin that I haven't read, but it's the best that I've read so far. And I think it's, I think you should read it.